Welcome back to Streamlit, part 12, where we're going to take a look at session state management. So like the application state and how it's managed in Streamlit. Like always, open up the terminal and get the app running. This starter template will be on the GitHub in the link below. Basically, all we're going to do is just make a pretty simple layout with a sidebar that's going to show the state as a JSON, so we can see what is changing in it pretty easily. I also do this all the time to debug. It's really convenient. After you completed that setup, we're going to first take a look at how to initialize values in a state. To initialize counters, you want to assign it a 0 or empty string, depending on what it is. And to illustrate that, we're going to take a look at a counter. To initialize a state, we're initializing a counter. You want to check if it's in the state. If it's not, then you initialize the value. This is just good practice. After initializing the values, we're going to increment the counter and then display it. It will be displayed on the screen because it will update the sidebar. We're also just going to print it to the screen like that, and then create a button to increment the counter. This is just some formatting, but we're going to show the counter and then create a button. When the button's pressed, we're going to add one to the counter. As you can see, once I hit that, it runs through the initialization stage, and then it runs through the counter as well. You see the counter is 0 on that first click, but now it's 1. So maybe if you actually wanted it to start with 1, you initialize the first state to 1, and then it will start with 1 rather than starting with 0. All right, moving on. Next, we're going to take a look at updating the state using callbacks. If you're not familiar, callbacks are used in Python, or a Python function that is called when an input widget changes, like a button. Some callbacks are on click and on change. So on change of a text input or on click of a submit button are two examples. To illustrate how to update state using callbacks, we're going to create a method, which is going to be our callback, or which is going to be what is called during our callback. And then we basically are looking for on change. So on change of the data, we're going to call this method and update the state. The key is what we're assigning the value here. Now, if we did that update? Oh, yep, it did. So as you can see, this updated to the input text in the current state. Next, we're going to take a look at deleting items from the state. A good way to think about the session state is it's basically a big dictionary or a key value pair. So you're basically just going to wipe the key or delete the key altogether. To do this in this app, we're going to create a button that resets the counter and the input text. It's basically just like the inverse of the initialization. So we're checking to see if there's values in there. And if there are, we're just going to use this delete command to just delete it out of the. So it's a lot like the inverse of how we initialize these values. We basically check to see if the counter is in the session state. If it is in there, we then use delete to delete it out. And then we show a success message. If it is, we're going to then go through and delete it and print success if it's successful. After delete, we have state and widget association. Every widget with a key is automatically added to the session state. So if we just add a widget here, aka the text input, then this key will be added, name will be added to the session state automatically. So then we don't have to set it like we did in the previous ones. We can just go grab it. Last but not least, we have forms and callbacks. The great thing about forms is the submit button actually is able to have a callback. So you could put an on click on the form submit button. This can allow you to do some like data validation and things with the data before the form is submitted. It's super useful, honestly. To illustrate this, we're gonna create the callback first, where we could just pretend that the form was submitted and this is the callback. And then after that, we have the actual form that we're going to create. Oh, got to scroll down. We just created a slider and a check me box. And one thing that's important to notice on forms, so we have our state filled out here. And the two that we want to take a look at is form submitter and checkbox, and slider should be around here, my slider at the very top. Interesting thing about forms, and this is why you using them, if it takes a long time for your page to load, forms are extremely useful because you're not constantly reloading your page every single time someone drags. So they're super useful in Streamlit, but nothing changes until you hit submit, and it updates the state and kind of reloads the page. But basically, these are useful just because you can do data validation. That is it for state in Streamlit. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. And up next, let me take a look. We have looking into caching and how important it is with Streamlit with how long it takes pages to load. I hope you enjoyed today, and I'll see you next time.